Today we will be talking about the White House farm murders that took place in 1985 in Essex, England. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this case, as it was the subject of many documentaries, and it also became the subject of a television drama series called White House Farm that started its broadcast in January 2020 on ITV in the UK and on HBO Max in the United States. I found this case so interesting, and I wanted to do a video on it after doing a bit more research after I watched the series. So let's get on into it then. Nevill Bamber was born on 8 June 1924. After finishing school, Nevill joined the Royal Air Force and he flew mosquitoes in North Africa during World War II. How strange does it sound saying someone flew mosquitoes? Like, imagine if someone actually flew mosquitoes. Sorry, getting off topic. The mosquito airplanes. Anyway, he broke his back in an air crash during the war, which led to him spending a year in hospital. At the end of the war, he returned to the UK and went to agricultural college with the intentions of becoming a farmer. This is where he met his best friend, Robert Boutflower. June Speakman was born on 3 June 1924. After finishing school, she attended secretarial college and went to work in some local offices. But as the war started up, she joined up to help. After the war, she returned to being a secretary, which is when she met Nevill and they started dating. Around the same time, her sister Pamela also started dating Neville's best friend Robert. June and Nevill were married in 1949 and moved into a cottage in Wash Lane. Nevill was a successful farmer and a magistrate at the local court. June became a homemaker and took part in community activities with her church, including Meals on Wheels. After being married for a few years, Nevill was offered a farm in Rhodesia. June's father, in turn, offered Nevill the tenancy of White House Farm if they decided to stay in the UK. Nevill initially wanted to move to Africa, as both his sisters had lived there. But unfortunately, they both tragically passed away, and he never spoke of the idea again. Together, June and Nevill took occupancy of the Georgian-style White House Farm on Pages Lane, Tolleshunt D'arcy Essex. The house was set among 300 acres of tenant farmland that had belonged to June's father. The couple longed to have children, but they had found out that they were unfortunately unable to have any biological children. They did not want to give up on that dream, and they followed the route of adoption, and they adopted a baby girl, Sheila Jean Bamber, who was born on 18 July 1957. June had unfortunately suffered with depression throughout her life. She had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital in 1958 after they had adopted Sheila, during which she was given electroshock therapy at least 6 times during her stay. Upon her release, she continued seeing a psychiatrist to manage her illness. The Bambers adopted their second child, a 6-month-old baby boy, that they named Jeremy Nevill Bamber. He was born on 13 January 1961. The Bambers were very secure financially. They were the owners of the farmhouse, property in London, 300 acres of land, and a caravan site that they shared ownership of with other family. The couple gave their children a good and stable home, and they received private education. Both the children during their high school years attended separate boarding schools. Sheila loved it as she made more friends and enjoyed all the school had to offer. Sheila regularly stayed over at friends' houses and had friends stay over at the farm. Jeremy, however, was allegedly unhappy at boarding school because he was bullied often.
Jeremy actually told a few of his friends in confidence that he was an adopted child, and children can be very cruel, and they made fun of it, and he was known as the bastard, apparently.
Jeremy deeply resented being sent away to school. He begged to come home, but his parents wouldn't let him. Even years later, he never forgave his mother for sending him away.
Jeremy allegedly enjoyed provoking his parents, riding in circles around his mother on a bicycle to try and irritate her, wearing makeup to upset his father, and once hiding a bag of live rats in the farm secretary's car.
She didn't like rats, and he put baby rats in his jacket pocket and then said to his mother, "Put your hand in here and see what I've got." And of course they were baby rats, which upset her greatly.
June was intensely religious and fervently involved in her church. She constantly prayed and read the Bible, and tried to get her children to adopt the same beliefs and practices that she had followed.
Very well respected. Like you would look up to your parents, village people looked up to Mr. and Mrs. Bamber.
Nevill was charismatic. He had a tremendous sense of humour. I can always remember Nevill loved a party. June, on the other hand, she was a much quieter person, shy, and the two of them were a perfect pair.
A lot of people said that she took religion perhaps a bit further than she ought, but that was her life and that's what she felt, and she respected religion and acted by it.
It is said that she had a rather poor relationship with Sheila as she was growing up. Sheila always felt that June had disapproved of her and the way that she had lived her life. June's relationship with Jeremy also became troubled as he grew older, and he allegedly stopped speaking to her at one point. After finishing school, Sheila attended Secretarial College in London. In 1974, when she was 17 years old, she discovered that she was pregnant by her boyfriend Colin Caffell, who was an art student when they had met. Even though her family were very religious, the Bambers allegedly arranged for Sheila to have the pregnancy terminated. Her relationship with her mother deteriorated significantly after that summer. Sheila and Colin continued dating, and June found the pair sunbathing naked in a field on the farm one day. After that incident, June reportedly started calling Sheila the devil's child. Sheila persevered in her life, and she continued with her secretarial course. She also trained as a hairdresser and worked in several salons in London. Sheila, however, had dreams of becoming a model. She decided to make her dreams a reality, and she briefly worked as a model with the Lucy Clayton agency, which included 2 months' work in Tokyo. People gave her the nickname Bambi because of her long and thin legs. It wasn't long after her return from Tokyo that Sheila fell pregnant again. Subsequent to this, her and Colin married at the Register Office in May 1977, when Sheila was 20 years old. Sadly, Sheila miscarried this baby in the 6th month of her pregnancy. Sheila's parents bought the couple a garden flat in Carlingford Road, Hampstead, to help Sheila recuperate. This was around the same time that Jeremy graduated school. He attended 6th form college and in 1978 achieved 7 O-levels. After graduation, Nevill paid for Jeremy to visit Australia, where he took a scuba diving course before traveling to New Zealand. Former friends of Jeremy alleged that he had broken into a jeweler's shop whilst in New Zealand and had stolen an expensive watch. He had also boasted of being involved in smuggling substances. Sheila tragically suffered another miscarriage in 1978. But on 22 June 1979, after 4 months of bed rest in hospital, she gave birth to her twins Nicholas and Daniel. By this time, Sheila and Colin's marriage had broken down, and allegedly just before the birth of the twins, Colin began having an affair, and he left Sheila 5 months after the birth of the twins.
Motherhood meant an awful lot to her. You know, she had several miscarriages, and the more miscarriages she had, the more important natural motherhood meant to her. It was the most important thing in the world to her. Well, she wasn't the most practical of people. She found a bit of a strain. She had a lovely relationship with the twins, and that was the most important thing to her.
Sheila became increasingly upset and agitated during this time. And on one occasion when Colin left her 21st birthday party with another woman, she required hospital treatment after breaking a window with her fist. The couple divorced in May 1982. Jeremy returned to England in 1982 to work on his parents' farm for £170 a week, and set up home in a cottage that Nevill had owned at 9 Head Street, Goldhanger. The cottage was around 3.5 miles or 5.6 kilometers away from White House Farm, a mere 5-minute drive by car and around 15 minutes by bicycle. Nevill also gave him a car to use and 7.5% of the family's caravan site that they had owned. In 1982, June was again hospitalized for her depression, but after seeking treatment she returned home and continued her outpatient care. After Sheila's divorce, Nevill bought her a flat in Moorshead Mansions, Maida Vale, and Colin helped to raise the children from his home in nearby Kilburn. Sheila decided to trace her birth mother, then living in Canada. They met at Heathrow Airport in 1982 for a brief reunion, but no relationship developed after their meeting. Jeremy had started dating Julie Magford in 1983, when she was 19 and studying for a degree in education in London. She had taken a holiday job in Sloppy Joe's, a pizzeria in Colchester, where Jeremy had a job at a bar in the evenings. The pair became close and fell in love quickly. Sheila's brief modelling career ended after the birth of the boys, and after the divorce she lived on welfare or took low-paying jobs, including as a waitress at a restaurant, in which dinner was served by young women in school uniforms, stockings and suspenders, as well as different cleaning jobs. There was also one episode of nude photography, which she later regretted. Colin and Sheila were both involved in the upbringing of the twins after their divorce. However, Sheila's mental health continued to decline, with episodes of banging her head against the wall. In 1983, her family doctor referred her to the same psychiatrist who had treated June. The psychiatrist stated that Sheila was in an agitated state, paranoid, and suffering from psychosis. She was admitted to St. Andrew's Hospital, a private psychiatric facility, where she was diagnosed with a schizoaffective disorder. During this time that he had been seeing Sheila, she told him that the devil had given her the power to project evil onto others, and that she could make her sons cause violence with her. She called them the devil's children, the exact thing that June had once called Sheila. She also stated that she believed that she was capable of murdering them or getting them to kill others. Sheila often spoke about ending her life, although she was not regarded as at risk of doing so. Sheila was discharged in September 1983, and she continued seeing her psychiatrist as an outpatient, which is when he concluded that his first diagnosis had been mistaken, and after seeing her for a longer period of time, he diagnosed her with schizophrenia and began treating her with antipsychotic medications. The twins were briefly placed in daytime foster care because of Sheila's health problems, but they were returned full-time to the parents at a later stage, with Colin and Sheila sharing custody. Sheila was, however, readmitted to St. Andrews in March 1985, after a psychotic episode in which she believed herself to be in direct communication with God, and that certain people, including her then boyfriend, were trying to hurt or kill her. Sheila was discharged 4 weeks later, and as an outpatient she received a monthly injection of an antipsychotic drug that had a sedative effect. From this point onward, the twins lived with Colin most of the time in Kilburn. However, Sheila still saw them often. A week-long visit to White House Farm with Sheila and the boys had been arranged for August 1985, at the Bambers' request. The plan was that the boys would visit their grandparents with Sheila before going on holiday to Norway with their father. Shortly before the visit, Sheila had seen her doctor and asked him to halve her dose of the medication she had been receiving by injection, and he agreed to it. Daniel and Nicholas were reluctant to stay at the farm. They disliked the fact that June had made them pray, and in the car on the way asked their father to speak to her about it. In addition, Daniel had become a vegetarian and was worried about being forced to eat meat. Colin told them that he would have a conversation with their grandma, and Daniel responded that she wouldn't listen anyway. On Sunday 4 August 1985, Sheila and the boys arrived at White House Farm, with Colin dropping the three of them off, to spend the week with June and Nevill. He told the three of them that they should enjoy themselves and that he would see them soon. 2 farm workers saw her the following day with her children and said she seemed really happy. Jeremy visited the farm on the evening of Tuesday 6 August to have dinner with the family. He stated that upon his arrival, he overheard a discussion between his sister and her parents. They had suggested that the twins be placed in daytime foster care again, but not in London, rather with a local family close to the farm, to help Sheila out. He said Sheila did not seem bothered by the suggestion, and had simply said that she would rather stay in London. A farm worker heard Jeremy leave around 9:30 p.m. The farm secretary phoned Nevill at around that same time and was left with the impression that she had interrupted an argument. She said that he had been short with her and hung up in irritation, which was strange because he never acted that way with her before, and that he was by all accounts a very even-tempered man. June's sister Pamela Boutflower also phoned the farm around 10 p.m. She spoke to Sheila at first, who she said was rather quiet, and afterwards she had spoken to June, who had acted like her normal self. At around 3:26 a.m. on 7 August 1985, Jeremy telephoned Chelmsford Police Station from his home to raise alarm. He informed them that he had received a telephone call from his father, from the White House Farm landline. He said his father told him that Sheila had gone berserk with a gun. Jeremy said the line went dead in the middle of the call and that he was worried. Upon receiving the call, the police station dispatched a car to go to the farm. 2 officers from the Witham police station arrived at the farm shortly after Jeremy. At that time, he had also been driving to the farmhouse as he was requested to meet the police there. He had been driving so slow that the police passed him on Pages Lane and arrived at the farm almost 2 minutes before him. The group waited outside the house and thought they saw something moving in one of the upstairs windows. They called for a tactical firearms unit upon learning more about what might be going on inside. The tactical unit arrived at the farm around 5 a.m. and upon further discussion, they made the decision to wait until daylight before they entered the house. They were unsure of what they might find once they had entered the house, as the house contained 7 weapons including rifles and shotguns. Jeremy also told the police that Sheila had suffered with a mental illness and might be highly unstable, which is why they had decided to wait. During this time, police established that all the doors and windows to the house were shut and seemed to have been locked, except for the window in the main bedroom on the upper floor, which had them determine that no one from the outside had or could gain entry without breaking something. Using a loud hailer, they spent around 2 hours trying to communicate with Sheila, with no response received. The only sound they reported from the house was that of a barking dog. While waiting outside, the police questioned Jeremy, who seemed rather calm, and gave them more information about the phone call from his father. He stated that it sounded as though someone had cut off the call whilst his father was still speaking to him. During this questioning, he also told them that he did not get along with his sister. When asked whether she might have gone berserk with a gun, as his father had stated to him, he replied to the police, "I don't really know. She's a nutter. She's been having treatment." The police asked him why his father would call him and not the police. He replied that his father was the sort of person who might want to keep things within the family. They also asked him why he had called the police station rather than the 999 emergency number. He said that he did not think it would affect how long the police would take to respond. He also told the police that Sheila was familiar with guns and that they had gone target shooting together when she was younger. He said he had been at the farmhouse himself a few hours earlier, and whilst he was there, he had loaded the rifle because he thought he had heard rabbits outside, but that he did not end up using it. He also informed them that he had mistakenly left the rifle on the kitchen table, fully loaded with a box of ammunition nearby, instead of locking it up as he usually does. He again relayed the story about the discussion the family had about possibly placing Sheila's sons in daytime foster care, and he told them that this is what must have set her off. During this time, he also talked about cars in general with one of the officers, telling him that the Isaiah Road caravan site would be able to stand him a Porsche soon. The police entered the farmhouse at 7:54 a.m., using a sledgehammer to break the back door. The door had been locked from the inside, with the key still in the lock. Upon entering the kitchen, they saw a telephone that was lying on one of the kitchen surfaces, with its receiver off the hook. Chairs and stools were overturned, and there were broken crockery and a broken sugar basin, a broken ceiling light, and what looked like blood on the floor. Neville's body was found in the kitchen, dressed in pajamas, slumped over an overturned chair, next to the fireplace. The scene projected that of a struggle. He had been shot 8 times. June's body was found in the master bedroom. She was found lying on the floor by the door of the bedroom. Her body and clothing were heavily blood-stained. She was found wearing her nightdress with bare feet. June had been shot 7 times. The twins, Nicholas and Daniel, were found in their beds in their room. They appeared to have been shot whilst they were asleep in bed. Nicholas had been shot 3 times, and Daniel had been shot 5 times. Sheila was found on the floor of the master bedroom, with her mother, but on the other side of the bed. She was in her nightdress, her feet were bare, and she had 2 bullet wounds under her chin. One of them was on her throat. The rifle was lying on her body, pointing up at her neck, with a Bible lying next to her. 25 shots had been fired in total, mostly at close range. The order that the family were killed in is unknown. Police believed that Sheila, who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, had fired the shots and then turned the gun on herself. When Jeremy was told that his entire family had passed away, he appeared to be in a state of shock. He broke down, cried, and vomited. The police and media were 100% convinced that Sheila had murdered them all and then shot herself. The Daily Express reported on the 8th of August 1985, the day after the murders. A farming family, affectionately dubbed the Archers, was slaughtered in a bloodbath yesterday. Brandishing a gun taken from her father's collection, the arranged divorcee, Sheila Bamber, 28, first shot her twin 6-year-old sons. She gunned down her father as he tried to phone for help. Then she murdered her mother before turning the automatic .22 rifle on herself. The result of this certainty led to an investigation that was poorly conducted. The crime scene was not secured and searched thoroughly, and evidence was not recorded or preserved. The scenes of crime officer had moved the murder weapon from Sheila's body without wearing gloves, and the weapon was also not checked for fingerprints until weeks after the crime. The Bible found near Sheila was also not examined at all. Officers did not take contemporaneous notes. Those who had dealt with Jeremy wrote down their statements weeks later. Within a couple of days, the police even went as far as to burn the blood-stained bedding and carpets, allegedly to spare Jeremy's feelings.
Within 24 hours, there was a general clean-out of White House Farm, and a fair amount was removed, in particular carpets, and one does wonder why, but they were taken out and they were destroyed before any real forensic evidence could be taken from them.
3 days after the killings, the police felt that they were done with the house, so they gave the keys back to Jeremy and his extended family. The inquest into the murders was opened on 14 August 1985, 7 days after the events at White House Farm. The police gave evidence that the killings constituted a murder-suicide, and upon this, the bodies were released to the family. Nevill, June and Sheila were cremated as a decision made by Jeremy. This was done to the dismay of the family, as they felt that June would have wanted to be buried in the churchyard. Colin had also asked that Sheila be buried with the boys, but Jeremy had told him he will give him the ashes to do with as he pleases after she was cremated. Daniel and Nicholas were buried, and Sheila's ashes were placed in the grave with them. Jeremy's behavior before and after the funeral increased suspicion among his family that he had been involved in the murders of his family. When cameras were pointed at him, he sobbed, and at one point he seemed to buckle and had to be supported by his girlfriend Julie. But when the cameras were not focused on him, he would smile and act like nothing was wrong. At the wake, it was said that he was smiling and joking and didn't show much emotion at all. Shortly after the funerals, Jeremy travelled to Amsterdam with Julie and a friend, where he bought a large quantity of the green herb to bring back to England and sell. The travel agent who sold the tickets to them recognized Jeremy from the papers and said the group had been in high spirits. Jeremy at that point also began selling his family's belongings. Julie's mother was offered June's car, and an ad was placed in a local newspaper asking £900 for Neville's car. Jeremy's cousin Anne had asked whether she could have his mum's engagement ring, and Jeremy said no. She seemed to have been annoyed with him after that. She later also took some other property from the house, which Jeremy asked her not to do. There were some skeptics in Jeremy's family, as well as in the police force, who had thought that something was off about what happened in that house on that night. Some police officers had felt that the evidence did not exactly line up with the murder-suicide theory. Members of Jeremy's extended family had also gone to police and asked whether it might have been possible that Jeremy had staged the events, upon which they were chased from the police station. The extended family and some police officers did not stop believing that Jeremy might have been the one to kill his family and carried on trying to investigate the case. The family felt that Sheila was incapable of shooting her family and her children. Something stood out when they looked into the injuries of Nevill and Sheila, and also when looking at where the empty cartridges were found, in relation to the shots fired upon each victim. Nevill was found downstairs in the kitchen, shot 8 times, but there were only 4 dispensed cartridges found in that area, which meant that Nevill must have been shot 4 more times upstairs to account for the total of 8 gunshot wounds that he had suffered. A total of 25 shots were fired, but the magazine of the gun could only carry 10 bullets at a time, which meant that the person doing the shooting must have reloaded at some point. This is when they felt that the shooter went downstairs to get ammunition, and Nevill must have followed. A scuffle ensued, and he was shot a further 4 times in the kitchen. There were 2 wounds to Neville's right side, and 2 to the top of his head, which would probably have resulted in unconsciousness, which meant that the first 4 shots he received would not have been the ones to his head, but the ones to his mouth and jaw. The left side of his lip was wounded, his jaw was fractured, and his teeth, neck, and larynx were damaged pretty severely. He also had gunshot wounds to his left shoulder and left elbow. The pathologist said he would not have been able to engage in purposeful talk with those injuries. So the question was put forth: how would Nevill have made the call to Jeremy, after his mouth was injured so severely. Also, there was no blood found on the phone when Nevill had made said call to Jeremy after he had been shot upstairs already. Nevill had black eyes and a broken nose, linear bruising to his cheeks, lacerations to his head, linear type bruising to his right forearm, bruising to his left wrist and forearm, and 3 circular burn type marks to his back. The linear marks were consistent with him being struck with a long blunt object, possibly the gun. It was felt that Sheila would not have been strong enough to inflict this beating on Nevill, who was 6 feet 4 inches or 1.93 meters tall, and by all accounts in good health. Of Sheila's 2 injuries to her neck, the pathologist stated that the lower of the injuries had occurred from 3 inches away and that the higher one was a contact injury. I'm not going to put the pictures of her injuries in the video, but you can find them on Google if you want to have a look at what I mean. It was said that the higher of the 2 would have killed her immediately, as the bullet was lodged in her brain. The lower injury would have killed her too, but not necessarily straight away. It was said that it would be possible for a person with such an injury to stand up and walk around, but the lack of blood on her nightdress suggested that she had not done so. The pathologist believed that the lower of her injuries had happened first, because it had caused bleeding inside her neck. If the immediately fatal wound had happened first, the bleeding would not have occurred to the same extent. The pattern of the bloodstains on her nightdress suggested that she had been sitting up when she received both injuries. There were no marks on her body suggestive of a struggle of any sort. So how would Nevill have received so many injuries, but she did not receive a single one in their struggle? Blood and urine samples were taken from Sheila, indicating that she had taken the haloperidol, the antipsychotic injection that she was prescribed, and several days before the events, she had smoked some of the green herb. The firearms officer who first saw her said that her feet and hands were clean. Her fingernails were perfectly manicured and not chipped or broken in any way, which would have been rather impossible to keep perfect when you are reloading the gun or struggling with your father. Her fingertips were also free of blood, dirt, or powder. The magazine of the gun would have been reloaded at least twice during the killings, and this would usually leave lubricant and material from the bullets on her hands. There were bloodstains on the back of her right hand, but other than that, her hands were completely clean. There was also no blood on Sheila's feet, and no sign of any other debris, such as the sugar that was on the downstairs floor. Low traces of lead were found on her hands and forehead at post-mortem, but the levels indicated were consistent with everyday handling of things around the house. The blood on her nightdress was consistent with her own, and no trace of firearm discharge residue was on it. Given that Sheila was wearing only a nightdress with no pockets, it was hard to see how she could have carried the cartridges around with her that she would need to reload the gun to fire 25 shots with her. Nevill had kept several guns at the farm. He was reportedly very careful with them, cleaning them after use and securing them. The gun used in the murders was kept to hunt mostly rodents with a silencer attached, according to family members. The silencer was not on the gun when the bodies was discovered, however. 3 days after the killings, Jeremy's cousins had been to the farm to clean up some more and remove some of the valuables, according to them, which is when one of the cousins, David Boutflower, found the silencer to said gun in the gun cupboard inside a box. He stated that there was something sticky on it that looked like blood, and they also saw that the surface of it was damaged. They also found some red paint on it. The finding of this silencer was allegedly witnessed by David's father, Robert Boutflower, and his sister Ann Eaton, as well as by the executor and the farm secretary. Instead of alerting the police of their finding immediately, the family took the silencer to Ann's house. They afterwards informed the police, and they collected it from their house on the 12th of August.
I picked up the silencer and I noticed it was sticky. Sticky to the touch. We suddenly realised that there was a spot of blood. Only a small spot, but it was right at the end. We quickly put it to one side and it was sent off to forensic. We never heard any more about it, except that they were exceptionally interested in the results that they'd found.
Upon the collection of the silencer, a police officer had noticed that there was a hair attached to it. The silencer was not properly tagged and bagged, but was taken for further analysis, however. The hair was also no longer attached to it when they started to process it. Whether the silencer was on the gun during the murders became a pivotal issue. The police allegedly searched the gun cupboard on the day of the murders, but they did not find said silencer where the cousins said they found it. During the forensic tests, blood was found on the inside and on the outside surface of the silencer. The outside blood was not enough to be analysed. The blood inside was found to be the same blood type as Sheila's, although it was noted that it could have been a mixture of Nevill and June's blood together. A firearms expert said the blood was back spatter caused by close contact shooting. The fact that there was blood found on the silencer pointed towards the silencer most definitely being used on the gun when the murders took place. This in turn meant that Sheila could not have shot herself. Forensic tests were done, and they indicated that the arms were not long enough to turn the gun on herself with the silencer attached. She would simply not be able to reach the trigger. It was then put forth that if she had shot the others with the silencer, and she realized that the gun was too long for her to shoot herself, she would probably have removed the silencer and put it next to her body, right? Why would she have any reason to go back all the way downstairs and put the silencer in the gun cupboard inside a box, then go all the way back upstairs to the main bedroom and shoot herself next to the bed? There were 3 telephones at White House Farm on the night of the shooting, all on the same landline. The first one was a cream rotary phone that was kept in the main bedroom on Neville's bedside table. The second one was a beige Statesman digital phone in the kitchen, and the third one was a blue Scepter 100 digital phone in the office on the first floor. There was a fourth phone that was usually in the house too, an Envoy cordless phone in the kitchen, but it had been picked up for repair on 5 August. The cream rotary phone had at some point been moved out of the main bedroom from where it usually was and into the kitchen, where the police found it with its receiver off the hook. They found the beige Statesman digital phone still in the kitchen but hidden in between a pile of magazines. They surmised that the rotary phone was removed from the bedroom so that no one could make any emergency calls from there. An interesting thing that I found when I looked into this is that the Statesman phone that was usually in the kitchen had redial facility, but the rotary phone did not have redial facility, and the rotary phone was the phone that was plugged into the wall, where the Statesman phone would usually be plugged in. So if the call was made from the Statesman phone, they could see and redial the last number that was dialed, and if it was made to Jeremy, they would be able to redial and see that the last call was made to him. So maybe the rotary phone was brought downstairs and plugged into the wall, so the police would be misled and not be able to check the redial facility. Jeremy's cousins returned to the farmhouse to search for the source of the red paint that they had found on the silencer. In the kitchen was a huge red mantle around the AGA cooker, where they found marks in the red paint on the underside of the mantelpiece. A sample was taken by a scenes of crime officer, and it was found to contain the same 15 layers of paint and varnish that was in the paint fleck that they had found on the silencer. Casts of the marks on the mantelpiece were deemed consistent with the silencer having come into contact with the mantle several times. The inference thereof was that the silencer had scratched the mantelpiece during a fight for the gun. The financial ties and inheritance issues with the immediate and extended family provided motive and added an extra layer of complexity to the case. The Bamber's company, N&J Bamber Limited, was worth around £400,000 in 1985. Further to this, in their wills, June left £230,000 and Nevill £380,000 to be split between Sheila and Jeremy upon their deaths. Neville's will had said that to inherit, Jeremy had to be working on the farm at the time of his death. Allegedly, at some point before their death, June had wanted to change her will to bypass both him and Sheila and leave her estate to the twins instead. The parents' estate included land and buildings occupied by Jeremy's cousins and family at the time of the parents' death. These cousins were made aware soon after the murders that Jeremy had intended to sell everything, which made them quite unhappy. The question remained how entry was gained to the house, if it was in fact Jeremy that had committed these crimes. What no one knew at first was that a small window on the bottom floor in the kitchen had a broken latch, and when you climbed out through it and slammed it hard, the latch would fall back into place and lock it, so no one would see that you climbed through it. It made it seem that the window had been locked up from inside, which means that you could easily exit the house through it. But still, how do you gain access to enter the house? About a month or so after the murders, a hacksaw blade was found in the garden near another window of the house, near the ground floor bathroom. This could have been easily used to open that window latch from the outside to gain access on the night of the murders. The windowsill also showed faint damage around that latch area. Police had interviewed Jeremy's girlfriend Julie on the 8th of August, one day after the murders. She told them that Jeremy had telephoned her at home in the early hours of 7 August, between 3 and 3:30 a.m., and said that there was something wrong at home, and sounded worried. She said she had been tired and had not asked what was wrong and went back to bed afterwards. Then later he phoned her to tell her that something had happened at the farm and that a police car would be picking her up and bringing her to his cottage. Julie had been a very supportive girlfriend through all of this, always by Jeremy's side, with photographs being taken at his parents' and Sheila's funeral, depicting exactly that, as she supported him as he was weeping and hanging onto her arm. On 7 September 1985, exactly 1 month to the day after the murders, Julie, by then Jeremy's ex-girlfriend, changed her initial statement that she had given to the police. She now alleged that Jeremy had been planning to kill his family for quite some time. Julie and Jeremy had a series of rows after the murders of his family, with him stating that he had wanted to end the relationship. During these fights, she said that they allegedly also argued about his involvement in the murders. She also said that one night they didn't sleep well and she put a pillow over his head, trying to smother him, and started crying. And when he asked her why she did that, she told him that if he were dead, he would always be with her. These two sound like they're a match made in heaven, if you ask me. During one of these arguments, on 4 September 1985, another woman phoned Jeremy in her presence, and it became clear to her by the way that he spoke to this other woman that he had been cheating on her. She got so angry at him that she smashed a mirror and slapped Bamber across the face. He then twisted her arm up her back and told her that he didn't want to be with her anymore. Exactly 3 days after this incident, she went to the police and changed her initial statement. In this amended statement, Julie said that Jeremy on a regular basis had said that he wished he could get rid of them all, talking about his family. He had also spoken disparagingly about his old father and mad mother who were trying to run his life according to him. Jeremy allegedly said that his sister had nothing to live for and that the twins were disturbed because she was their mother. He also complained about the fact that his parents were paying for Sheila's expensive flat in London. She said that she had dismissed all of this as idle talk and him just venting his frustrations. She also alleged that he had talked about sedating his parents with sleeping pills, shooting them, and setting fire to the farmhouse. He reportedly said that Sheila would make a good scapegoat if he went through with it. Julie said that Jeremy had discussed cycling along the back roads to the house, entering the house through the kitchen window because the catch was broken, and leaving it via a different window that latched when it shut from the outside. He allegedly also told her that a telephone call would need to be made from White House Farm to his home because the last phone call made would be of importance and would give him an alibi. He also allegedly told her that he had killed rats with his bare hands to test whether he was able to kill. But alas, it had taught him that he would not be able to kill his family himself. This did not stop him from talking about doing it on an ongoing basis, according to her. Julie told police that she had spent the weekend before the murders with Jeremy at his cottage, and during this visit, she saw his mother's bicycle there. She informed police that Jeremy phoned her at 9:50 p.m. on 6 August to say that he had been thinking about the crime all day, that he was pissed off, and that it was tonight or never. To which she apparently said nothing, I guess. Between 3 and 3:30 a.m. on 7 August, he phoned her again to say, "Everything is going well. Something is wrong at the farm. I haven't had sleep all night. Bye, honey, and I love you lots." Weird. Her flatmate indicated that the call had come through closer to 3 a.m. as it woke her up. Jeremy called her again later that morning to tell her that Sheila had gone mad and that a police car was coming to pick her up. When she arrived with the police at Jeremy's cottage, she said he pulled her to one side and said, "I should have been an actor." Later on the evening of 7 August, she said that she asked him whether he had killed his family. He said no, but that he had a friend of his do it, and he even gave her the name of the person. This person that he named was a plumber that the family had used in the past. Jeremy allegedly told the friend how he could enter and leave the farmhouse undetected, and that one of his instructions had been for the friend to phone him from one of the phones in the farmhouse that had a memory read-dial facility, so that if the police checked it, he would have an alibi. He then told Julie that everything had gone exactly as planned, except that Nevill had put up a fight, and the friend had become angry and shot him 7 times. The friend had allegedly told Sheila to lie down and shoot herself last so she would be implicated. The friend then placed the Bible on her chest, so she appeared to have killed herself in a religious frenzy. When Julie asked him about the twins, he told her that they had been shot in their sleep. She said that Jeremy had told her that he paid this friend £2,000. Nevill had, however, been shot 8 times, not 7, and the Bible was not found on Sheila's chest, as Julie said, that Jeremy told her. The things that Julie had been relaying were things that had been incorrectly printed in newspapers, in several in fact, which made them suspicious of what Julie had been saying. Never mind the fact that she didn't come forward to tell them any of this until Jeremy had left her. She had even been the one to identify the family's bodies at the morgue, and still said nothing to anyone. During police interviews, Julie admitted to a brief background of dishonesty. In 1985, she had been cautioned for using a friend's checkbook after it had been reported as stolen to obtain goods worth around £700. She said that she and the friend had repaid the money to the bank, however. She also acknowledged to having helped Jeremy in March 1985 to steal just under £1,000 from the office of the Osea Road caravan site that his family had owned. She said that he had staged a break-in to make it appear that strangers were responsible.
I didn't think that at that stage anyone would believe me, and Jeremy was also so terribly confident that nobody could do anything about it, that he said there was nothing I could do anyway. I remember one occasion in particular when he was he said to me with quite a lot of vehemence that he'd get rid of all of the family, including Sheila and the boys, and he would do so by shooting them. I kept on saying to him that I had to say something and I couldn't keep this in, and questioning him. He became frightened of me, which is what made me become frightened of him, because he obviously was getting quite nervous about the fact that I wasn't prepared to just cover him, if you like, anymore. And it was the Saturday morning then that I went to the police.
As a result of Julie's amended statement, Jeremy was arrested on 8 September 1985, as was the plumber that Julie had implicated. The friend that she implicated had a solid alibi for that night and was released after police questioned him. Jeremy told the police that Julie was lying because he had jilted her. He said that he loved his parents and sister and wouldn't hurt them. He denied that they had kept him short of money, so it was most definitely not a motive. When he was asked about their break-in at the caravan park, he told them that the only reason that he had done so was to prove that security was poor. He had wanted to install new systems like CCTV, but his uncle Robert and his cousins had been adamant that it was not necessary. He also claimed that he had seen his parents' wills, and that they had left the estate to be shared between him and Sheila. When he was asked about the rifle and the silencer, he told police the gun was used mostly with the silencer off, because it would not fit in its case or in the cupboard. On the 9th of September, Jeremy was charged with breaking into the Osea Bay caravan site on 25 March 1985 and stealing £980. He was released on bail on 13 September. After his release, he went on holiday to Saint-Tropez with a friend. Shortly before this, he tried to sell his life story and 20 nude photographs of Sheila to the Sun newspaper for £20,000. How sick is this guy? When he returned to England on 29 September, he was arrested at the Dover ferry port and charged with the murders of his family. After the saw blade was found, he was confronted with the evidence and said that before leaving England, he returned to the farmhouse, gaining entry by a downstairs window. He claimed that he did this because he had left his keys in London and needed papers from the house for the trip to France. He entered through the window rather than borrow the keys from the farm's housekeeper who lived nearby. He further claimed he had occasionally gained entry to the farmhouse through a downstairs window and had used a thin blade to move the catches from the outside, and this was normal for him and he did it often. Jeremy's trial started on 3 October 1986. It was reported that Jeremy cut an arrogant figure in the witness box. At one point, when prosecutors accused him of lying, he replied, "Well, that is what you've got to establish." The prosecution stated that Jeremy was motivated by hatred and greed. He had left White House Farm around 10 p.m. on 6 August 1985, after dining with his family to drive to his home. Later, perhaps in the early hours of the morning of 7 August, he had returned to the farm on his mother's bicycle, which he had borrowed a few days earlier. Cycling along a back route that avoided the main roads and approached the farmhouse from the back. Bamber then entered the house through a downstairs window, took the rifle with the silencer attached and gone upstairs. He shot June in her bed, but she managed to walk a few steps before collapsing and dying. He then shot Nevill in the bedroom too, but Nevill was able to get back downstairs, where he and Jeremy fought in the kitchen, before he shot his father again. He had shot Sheila in the main bedroom next to their mother, and he had shot the children in their beds as they had slept. He then arranged the scene to make it appear as if Sheila was the killer, which is when he discovered that she could not have reached the trigger with the silencer attached. So he then removed it and returned it to the gun cupboard. He also placed a Bible next to her body to introduce a religious theme. After phoning his house and leaving the kitchen phone from its hook, he left the house via a kitchen window, perhaps after showering, and banged the window from the outside so that the catch dropped back into position and it looked locked. He then cycled back home, and shortly after 3 a.m, he phoned Julie, then the police at 3:26 a.m, to say he had just received a frantic call from his father. He wanted to create a delay before the bodies were discovered, so he phoned a local station instead of the 999 emergency number. He drove slowly to the farmhouse. He had told police that his sister was familiar with guns, so that they would be reluctant to enter. The prosecution further argued that he had not received a telephone call from his father, that Nevill was too badly injured after the first shots to have spoken to anyone, and that there was no blood on the kitchen phone that had been left off the hook. They also maintained that if there was a real emergency, that Nevill would have called the police before calling Jeremy. They also argued that if Jeremy had in fact received such a call, it would have made sense that he would have dialed 999, alerted the farm workers that were staying on the property, then made his way quickly to White House Farm himself. The silencer played a central role in the prosecution's case. It was deemed to have been on the rifle when it was fired, because of the blood found inside it. The prosecution said the blood had come from Sheila when the silencer was pointed at her, and that she was unable to shoot herself with it on due to her arms not being long enough to reach, and that if it would have in fact been on the gun, it would have been removed and found next to her. She would not have trudged downstairs and put it back in the gun cupboard. Despite Sheila's erratic mental state, her doctor testified that the kind of violence necessary to commit the murders was not consistent with his view of her. In particular, he said he did not believe she would have killed her father or children, because her difficult relationship was confined to her mother. Colin also testified to the same, that despite her tendency to throw things and sometimes hit him, she had never harmed the children or shown any inclination towards wanting to hurt them. June's sister Pamela Bartflower testified that Sheila was not a violent person, and that she had never known her to use a gun. June's niece, Anne Eaton, also told the court that Sheila did not know how to use a gun. The fact that she had carried out the killings was further discounted because it was argued that she had not recently expressed any suicidal thoughts. It was also put forth that she would have lacked the strength to overcome her father, and there was no evidence on her clothes or body that she had moved around the crime scene or been involved in a struggle. In particular, her long fingernails had remained intact. A farm worker testified that Jeremy had once said of Sheila, "I'm not going to share my money with my sister." The court heard that in March that year, whilst discussing security at the family's caravan site, Jeremy had told his uncle, "I could kill anybody, I could even kill or easily kill my parents." Jeremy denied having said this. The defense maintained that the witnesses who said that Jeremy disliked his family were lying or misinterpreted his words. They also stated that Julie had lied about Jeremy's confession to her. They said because he had betrayed her and cheated on her, she was acting like a woman scorned. They indicated no one reported seeing Jeremy cycle to and from the farm. Also, no evidence was found on the bicycle to indicate that this had happened. There were no visible marks on Jeremy on the night in question that suggested that he had been in a fight, and no bloodstained clothing of his was recovered. They said that he had not driven to the farm as quickly as he could have after his father had phoned him, because he was afraid of what he might find once he arrived there. There was no probative value in the finding of a hacksaw in the garden because Bamber had entered the house via the windows many times like this before the killings and since, according to him. The defense argued that Sheila was the killer and that she did know how to handle guns, having been raised on a farm, and that she had attended shoots with the family in Scotland when she was younger. They also reiterated that she had a very serious mental illness. She had told psychiatrists that she felt capable of killing her children, and that she had easy access to the gun as the loaded rifle and the cartridges had been left on the kitchen table by Jeremy. They also mentioned that there had been a recent family argument about placing her children in daytime foster care, which might have set her off. Her dose of the antipsychotic drug had recently been halved, and she was found to have smoked the green herb just a few days earlier, which is known to increase psychotic symptoms in schizophrenics. A former boyfriend of Sheila's also gave a written statement to the court, stating that she had some kind of breakdown in March 1985 in his presence. This is when she was hospitalized. She had begun beating the wall with her fists because the telephone line had gone dead during a call that she was on. She had said that the phone was bugged and talked about God and the devil and how much the devil loved her. This former boyfriend said that he had feared for the safety of people around Sheila. He also said that Sheila had a deep and intense dislike of June. The defense argued that people who have carried out so-called altruistic killings have been known to engage in ritualistic behavior before killing themselves, and that Sheila might have placed the silencer in the cupboard, changed her clothes and washed herself, which would explain why there was little lead on her hands or why sugar from the floor was not found on her feet. There was also a possibility that the blood in the silencer was not hers, but a mixture of Neville's and June's, they maintained. During sentencing, the judge told the jury that there were 3 crucial points, in no particular order, that they needed to consider. Number 1, did they believe Julie Markford or Jeremy Bamber? Number 2, were they sure that Sheila was not the killer who then committed suicide afterwards? He said this question involved another. Was the second fatal shot that Sheila fired with the silencer on or not? If yes, she could not have fired it because her arms could not reach. And finally, did Nevill call Jeremy in the middle of the night as he said? If there was no such call, it undermined the entirety of Bamber's story. The only reason he would have had to invent the phone call was that he was responsible for the murders. On 28 October 1986, the jury found Jeremy Bamber guilty by a majority of 10-2. The court sentenced him to 5 life terms with the recommendation that he serve a minimum of 25 years before being able to apply for release on parole. The judge on his final statement told him, "Your conduct in planning and carrying out the killing of 5 members of your family was evil, almost beyond belief." In December 1994, Jeremy's sentence was changed to full life-term sentence without the possibility of parole. Immediately after the verdict was announced, Julie sold her story to News of the World for £25,000. It was later found out that she actually sold her story whilst the trial was still ongoing, but they would only pay her and publish her story if Jeremy ended up being convicted. Convenient. Because of Jeremy's conviction, the estate of June and Nevill passed instead to Jeremy's aunt and uncle, Pamela and Robert Bartflower, and his cousins Anne Eaton and David Bartflower, who had found the silencer in the house. This meant that the land that Nevill had previously assisted Anne's husband Peter Eaton in buying, that Jeremy intended to sell, now belonged to them outright. Anne Eaton and her husband Peter moved into White House Farm pretty soon after Jeremy was convicted. She had done several TV interviews in the house in the following years, and had kept the house mostly as it was on the night of the family's murders, keeping the same wallpaper, furnishings, and even a blood-stained lamp in the main bedroom. Jeremy argued that the family set him up, a claim that one of the group was dismissed in 2010 as an absolute load of piffle. He stated that his cousins had looked for evidence of his guilt behind his back whilst he was mourning the deaths of his family. The relationship between the Essex police and the Bartflowers and Eatons was also questioned. It was said that they shared information from the case with Anne, and some had even become close friends of the Eatons. Anthony Pargeter, a cousin of Jeremy on his father's side, also testified during Jeremy's trial against Jeremy. He and his sister, Jacqueline, also benefited financially from the Bamber estate, but only after ensuing a legal battle with the other relatives. Jeremy stated that his family was instead motivated by the inheritance, that they had manufactured evidence against him, perjured themselves in court, and conspired with the police to have him convicted and ensure that he did not receive his inheritance. Jeremy has since launched 2 legal actions while in prison, claiming a share of the estate which the cousins said was part of an attempt to harass and vilify them. In 2003, he began a High Court action to recover £1.2 million from the estate of his maternal grandmother, arguing that he should have inherited her home, which went instead to his mother's sister Pamela. The grandmother had cut Jeremy out of her will when he was arrested. She never made a statement in person or written about Jeremy after his arrest. It was said that she was too ill to do so. But she did, however, change her will after he was arrested. He also maintained that he was owed 17 years' rent from his cousins who lived in that house. In 2004, he went to the High Court again to claim a £326,000 share of the profit from the caravan site. The court ruled against him in all of these cases. After the trial, Colin started writing a book as a way of trying to process everything that he had been through. The book was published in 1994 and is called In Search of the Rainbow's End. He later opened up a psychotherapy workshop called Life, Death and Transition, where he worked with felons and convicted murderers. He gave a speech at a conference one day in Scotland and met a woman there that he fell in love with. He closed down his practice and moved to Cornwall to be with her, to a new place where no one knew his tragic history, where he could try and start over. He got married to this lady, whose name is Sally, and they share a daughter. After meeting Sally, he started up with his sculpting and pottery again, and has since had a successful career as a ceramicist and sculptor. To this day, Colin still defends Sheila's innocence. Jeremy has protested his innocence throughout, although his extended family remains convinced of his guilt. So that's it for part 1, guys. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. I'm doing a part 2 on this as well. I will link it down below. Please check that out if you want to find out more about what Jeremy has been up to after his sentencing. He has got a new team who indicated that they have new evidence, which we will be discussing in part 2. So please check that out. Please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And thank you so much again for joining me. Until next time, bye!